It's the show the establishment warned you about.
That's right. Welcome back. It's the Dr. Tommy Show, broadcasting live from the free state of Florida. I am your host, Dr. Tommy, in Echelon Health Studios, in the newly renovated Echelon Health Studios, right here in Tampa Bay, Florida, on a Friday. I'm glad you're here. I wanted to cover some things that I brought up yesterday just to give a little bit more context. And I also wanted to talk about some AI stuff, just fun with AI. So yesterday I was talking about, yesterday or a couple days ago? It was probably a couple days ago. I was talking about immigration. And one of the things I was talking about was there was an article that was quoted by Ace of Spades, and it was quoting from a article that Breitbart had done. And the article basically said that half of immigrant households, and they were using the term immigrant to mean legal and illegal. So people who are not from the United States, who have either moved here and acquired citizenship or otherwise legal status, or are here illegally, as the Dems like to call it, undocumented. Anyway, and CNN likes to call it undocumented, and the Washington Post and Google AI and everything. Anyway, so illegal and legal immigrants, if you take that term as a whole, 50% or thereabouts of those households receive some form of welfare. Welfare meaning payments, transfer payments from from an American, or maybe a non-American, I don't know, from a taxpayer to someone else. So basically, as Walter Williams used to say, if you walk by, he said, picture yourself, you're walking down in New York City and there's this poor lady, destitute, sleeping on the grate, and the heat coming up from the subway is the only thing keeping her warm. And she has a blanket over her, and your friend looks to you and he says, "Gosh, that's terrible. This is awful. Someone should do something about that." And you say, "Yes, someone should do something about that." And then he reaches into your pocket and takes your wallet out and peels off a couple 20s and sticks it under her blanket and then gives you your wallet back, and away you go. Well, that's welfare as the state practices it. And as Walter Williams liked to point out, that the better way to do that would be to say, "Oh, here's this poor lady. Someone should do something about it." And that person then reach into their pocket and give that person $20 or $40, or say to his friend, "Let's figure out why she's here. Maybe there's something we can do to help. Maybe there's a agency or something. Maybe she's had illness, a medical illness, or maybe schizophrenia or a psychiatric illness like schizophrenia, and that's why she's here." Anyway, so that's the difference. Welfare, as is practiced by the United States government, it means that meaning the government, take from one person's money, taxpayers' money, and just give it to somebody else without their consent. Now, some people say, "Well, I've consented to it because I voted for that." Well, you consented to your money being taken, and then by also voting for that, you consent to my money being taken too. So it's not exactly correct. The better way to do it would be to do it, through private charity, or at least through the state versus the federal government. Because why is that? Well, it's not because I'm such a mean, bad guy or anything like that with no heart. The reason why is because the real reason for welfare payments, transfer payments, is not for anything to do with the actual beneficiaries. And you might say, "Well, explain yourself." Well, I wrote this in 2017. This is on the blog on drtommy.com/blog. And it says, "You made Uncle Sam and his buddies rich." It says the top four. Now, this is written in 2017, so you'll have to keep that in mind. It says the top four richest counties in the United States are in the communities surrounding Washington, D.C. To round out the top 10, there are a few in places like Colorado and California, and one more in D.C. So the top four richest counties were around Washington, D.C. All right. The federal government expanded dramatically in the 20th century and has continued growing into the 21st. Between 1900 and 2012, federal government receipts increased from 3% of the economy's output to 16.5%. So federal government receipts, what the federal government took from the economy, went from 3% to 16.5%. So doing some math there, it's a big increase. Federal expenditures rose from 2.7% of the economic output to 24%. So the government contribution to economic output went from about the same amount as they took in to a lot more than what they take in. State and local governments have also expanded relative to the rest of the economy, although not nearly as much as the federal government. Between 1930 and 2012, state and local government receipts grew from 8% to 13% of economic output, while their expenditures rose from 9.1% to 14.8%. So basically, states have increased as well. They're spending more than they take in, but not as dramatically as the federal government. And it says overall government from 1930 to 12, receipts increased from 11.1% to 26.4% of the gross domestic product. Expenditures rose from 12.1 to 35%. So the government is taking more and spending more, and they're spending more than they take in. And this is from taxfoundation.org. The link is there. So that is from, like I said, 2017, and they were talking about numbers that went up to 2012. Granted, we're in 2026 now. I don't think it's changed. Okay, so why is all this important? Well, my point is that the war on poverty it has started since LBJ, and then has built upon the Social Security Act and things like that, is not for the people who are poor. It's not for the people who are on welfare. It's actually for the businesses. So, and this is back from the article. It says blog. And one of the clearest beneficiaries of government welfare programs are businesses. Approximately 18% of all food stamp spending in 2013 went to Walmart alone. And here's a link here. That is from Slate. Okay, so that's from Slate, which is not a right-wing website. Billions of dollars taken from one American and given to another American to whom it did not belong, and then given to Walmart. So, like I've said, the beneficiaries of government spending are not the government. I'm sorry, are not the people who this expenditures are for, nominally. So if I send a check to someone and it has their name on it and it's from Uncle Sam to that person, and they deposit it in their bank account, but that's arcane. So now what we do is we just send it direct deposit, just like any other check. And if you worked for it, and then it goes into their account, and then they go spend it. And the beneficiaries are the actual people who get the money. So the welfare beneficiary is a way to traffic money from the government / taxpayers to the stakeholders. And the stakeholders in this case was Walmart, largely Walmart in 2013. But it's not just that. It's Medicare spending. It's any type of spending where money is diverted from the person who owns it to someone else who can then give it to somebody else. Now, so you say, well, that sounds like that doesn't sound right, because those people actually benefit and you're just taking things out of context. No, they do benefit. I'm not saying they don't benefit at all, but I'm saying the reason for this program is not for the people. The reason for the program is for the the person who benefits from the end payment. And so when you think about welfare spending and all that, and the immigrant households being 50%, and back to that article I was quoting from a few days ago, Americans also are on welfare, but at a lower percentage. And that's not to say that immigrants are worse than American, native born, or anything like that. My point is this, is what is the reason for open borders? And so today, I just saw on Breitbart, it says, Thune Cave, Senate approves funding for most of DHS. Senate. This is the Senate run by the Republicans, but not for border enforcement. And so why is the immigration, quote unquote, problem the way it is? It's because those people are on welfare. This is one of the reasons. Those people are on welfare at high rates, and those rates are needed to stay high in order to benefit retailers and other people who sell goods. And now another thing that is indirect. So this is an indirect result of welfare spending. So let's say I have a person who lives, on modest means and in Tampa. Let's say that that's a single father. Let's take a direct. Actually, let's do this. Let's make it completely personal. Okay. Let's say there's a single father in Lakeland, Florida, and that single father has 4 kids. And that single father works at a lumber yard, and he makes a little bit of money, but not enough to pay the bills. And basically, he's struggling. Now, that was the situation, which was my family growing up in the 1980s. And so what happened was my father was not able to pay for all of us kids, right? So he did not go on welfare. That's a different story. But anyway, he didn't go on welfare. But let's suppose in that scenario that he did go on welfare. And let's suppose that the welfare benefits were enough where he said, well, great. I'm not worried. Let's say he went from his house in Lakeland and moved into government housing with his 4 kids. And he said, okay, well, cool. And so he no longer had to pay for his house, and instead was not paying for his house. And then let's say also that he and his kids went on Medicaid, and they didn't go to the doctor previously, except for emergencies. But let's say that they went on Medicaid. So suddenly you give him a house, you give him Medicaid, and then let's say you also start sending him money, cash benefits. Well, suddenly that stimulates the economy because he starts spending it on things that he wasn't able to spend it on before. And he spends it on, let's say he spends on groceries, he spends it on clothes. And let's say that he does that let's say he does it for 5 years. And in the meantime, he uses that little boost, and he goes back to school and he gets a degree, he finishes a degree and becomes a teacher and gets off welfare. That is called a success story. That is called a success story on welfare. Now, let me tell you what is more likely to happen. What is more likely to happen is that person would be on welfare for 5 years. And then 5 years turns into 10 years. And then 10 years turns into 15 years. And before you know it, his kid has another kid. And guess what? That kid's on welfare. That kid's child is born probably out of wedlock. And Medicaid is used to deliver that baby. And so, again, it contributes to this cycle. And then so what you do have, instead of that thing where he gets off in 5 years, this becomes a generational thing. And in the meantime, guess who benefited? So that extra money that was put into his pocket, let's say they gave him a lot of money. Let's say they gave him so much money that he not only paid for clothes and food, but he also was able to save because he wasn't paying for food. Maybe he got food stamps. And then he spent that money on things like iPhones, even though iPhones didn't exist in the 80s. But anyway, let's say it was now, and he spent money on iPhones. And let's say his daughter liked to get her hair done, and so he spent money on her getting her hair done. And let's say that he wanted a new car even. He bought a new car. He got so much extra money, and generationally it just expands and expands. So you can see how this translates into welfare not being about the welfare beneficiary. Because if it was, that first problem or that first scenario would be the ideal scenario where he got off welfare, got on his way, and away he goes. And that actually happened to a large extent in the 1990s when Bill Clinton was the president. And to his credit, he was the president when he signed the Welfare Reform Act. And in classic Clinton triangulation, made it seem like it was his idea. It was not his idea, but he did sign it to his credit. And Newt Gingrich and the House passed it, and he signed it, and this, that, and the other. Anyway, the Welfare Reform Act said that you should be on welfare no longer than a set amount of years. And I think it was 5 years. And then after that, you had to get off of welfare. You had to get off. You had to transition to work. And the idea is to end this cycle of welfare dependency and end this cycle of poverty, essentially. And what happened was, over time, mostly with Barack Obama and others, that welfare reform was slowly chipped away till now it's basically a shell of its former self. And so, but what happened when that welfare reform was being passed, and I remember this even though I was only a teenager, is they said, well, people are going to die. People are going to die People are going to have to choose between the electricity and food. Children are going to die. Women and children are going to die. And, it's just going to be a catastrophe. And Newt Gingrich is the boogeyman. Newt Gingrich was as big a boogeyman in the 1990s as Donald Trump is now to the media, if you can believe that. Newt Gingrich was seen as basically a guy who wanted to put children in orphanages, put old people in homes to wither away and die. And he was vilified as much or more potentially than Donald Trump. He was never called a Nazi to my recollection, but it was more of he was the cross between the Grinch and Scrooge and maybe even somebody else. But anyway, the devil. So what happened, though, was the dramatic decrease in the number of welfare recipients. And those people who decreased, it wasn't because they died or were homeless. They actually got jobs. And so that's the big thing that we need to remember when you read a headline like immigrant families are at a high rate of welfare compared to native-born Americans, is that's done for a reason. And immigrants are brought in here for a reason. And the big reason is to put them on welfare, to develop a client constituency that will be a reliable voting bloc for years to come. And you may say, well, illegal immigrants aren't allowed to vote. Well, that's true. There's a couple workarounds that you can give them licenses. Maybe they can vote in small numbers illegally. You can wait for legislation to pass. You could bring in a gang of 8 potentially with a John McCain and a young Marco Rubio and a Lindsey Graham and try to pass some type of immigration reform that's comprehensive, because you can't have immigration. You can't stop illegal immigration without comprehensive immigration reform. That's what we were told, is that the only way to stop illegal immigration was you can't build a wall. You can't enforce immigration rules. You have to have comprehensive immigration reform. And comprehensive immigration reform means we have to have more illegal immigrants who are here currently made citizens. And that's been the mantra of Republicans forever until Donald Trump. And anyway, so Donald Trump proved that was not true, obviously. But anyway, the reason for immigration largely is to build this big client constituency that's relying on the government to give them things. And also the reason for it is so that beneficiaries, such as the people we mentioned before, Walmart, and other places like that, so that they can benefit from it. Apple, hair salons, whatever. Anybody who has disposable income now can spend it with those companies if you satisfy their basic needs. And that's what I just want to expand upon a little bit about previously. Okay, moving on. So I've been messing around with AI, and one of the things I was doing is this is a Grok AI simulation. And what this is what I asked it to do was I said, look, what do you think about this? George Foreman and Mike Tyson fight each other in 1990. And the setup was this. 1990, there was a doubleheader between George Foreman and Mike Tyson. George Foreman fought Adelson Rodriguez, who was then at that point a fringe contender from South America, Brazilian heavyweight, decent heavyweight, actually very successful Brazilian heavyweight champion, very popular, called, what was his middle name or his moniker? I can't remember. Anyway, he was a popular Brazilian heavyweight, and he had been a contender until he faced Evander Holyfield, who at that time was coming up from the cruiserweight ranks and a newly minted heavyweight. This was in 1989, I think. And he faced off against Evander Holyfield in what was seen as one of Holyfield's more impressive early heavyweight fights. He actually completely knocked Adelson Rodriguez cold with one right hand. And that was that was during the time when people said that Evander Holyfield did not have a heavyweight punch. And that fight went a little ways to maybe dispelling the rumor that Evander Holyfield did not have a heavyweight punch, and he actually creamed Adelson Rodriguez in 2 rounds. Well, Adelson Rodriguez wasn't finished as a fighter, and he stayed in the ranks, and I think he was ranked number 9 by the WBC by the time this fight took place. And anyway, when the fight took place, Adelson Rodriguez faced off against George Foreman and was again KO'd in 2 rounds, this time by a left hook. And on that same card, Tyson fought Henry Tillman, who was his nemesis as an amateur and actually had beaten Tyson twice as an amateur. Although in this fight, he was extremely heavy underdog. I don't remember exactly how big, but at least 20-1. And Tyson was coming off at this point the knockout loss to Buster Douglas, the shock loss to Buster Douglas, I believe in February of 1990, and this was June. So 4 months had transpired since Tyson was knocked out by Buster Douglas to lose his undisputed heavyweight championship, presumed to be invincible before that, much the way that Foreman was invincible before he fought Muhammad Ali. So anyway, I said, all right, let's suppose that at this time, June of 1990, when the doubleheader took place, immediately afterward, there was talk about a rematch, or not sort of rematch, another fight that would take place in November, potentially, between the winners of those 2 doubleheaders, and that would be George Foreman and Mike Tyson, and they would fight, and that fight never happened, unfortunately. But through the power of AI, we can pretend that it did happen. And so on the right, you see, if you're not listening, I'm sorry, if you're listening, what I did was I asked Grok, I think it was Grok, or maybe it was Love Art, to create an image of Mike Tyson and George Foreman mid-round engaged in a clinch along the ropes. And as you can see there, that's a pretty good looking image there. That looks to me like a George Foreman, Mike Tyson fight would have turned out. Tyson maybe is standing on his toes there. Maybe Foreman's leaning over, which is why the 6'3" Foreman or 6'4" Foreman is kind of near the same height as Tyson. Tyson was probably a little bit shorter, but anyway, and Foreman looks very svelte there. But let's imagine that Foreman took this fight so seriously that he got down to about 250 pounds. So that is a reasonable approximation. And then I asked Grok, I said, what happens if these 2 fight? And I just wanted to play, hopefully it'll work, what Grok had to say. If not, I'll read it. But anyway, this is what I said. I said, do a 2-paragraph recap of the fight as it would have appeared in the ring, and read it for me. And here's what it said.
Las Vegas. In what may go down as one of the most savage heavyweight collisions of the modern era, 41-year-old George Foreman turned back the clock and stopped a prime Mike Tyson in 5 brutal rounds Saturday night at Caesar's Palace. The 263-pound Foreman, fresh off his second-round destruction of Adelson Rodriguez just weeks earlier, used his massive frame and sledgehammer power to weather the early storm from the 24-year-old Tyson and eventually overwhelm him with clubbing blows that echoed the terror of his first reign. Tyson, the explosive former undisputed champion, coming off a quick demolition of Henry Tillman, came out firing in classic peekaboo fashion. He darted in and out with blinding speed, ripping combinations to the body and head that snapped Foreman's head back in the opening rounds. The crowd roared as Iron Mike landed clean shots that would have felled lesser men. But the hulking Foreman simply absorbed them on his granite chin and kept advancing like an unstoppable force of nature. By the 4th round, Foreman had begun cutting off the ring effectively, leaning his weight on the smaller man and trapping him on the ropes for short, punishing exchanges. A heavy right hand in round 4 visibly staggered Tyson, shifting the momentum in a heartbeat. The end came suddenly in the 5th. Tyson tried one last desperate swarm, but Foreman timed him perfectly with a crushing right uppercut followed by a looping left hook that sent the Brooklyn Brawler crashing to the canvas. Tyson beat the count at 8, but his legs were gone. Foreman poured on the heavy artillery, and referee Mills Lane had seen enough at 2:14 of the round, waving it off as Tyson crumpled under the assault. Foreman, arms raised in triumph, proved that age was just a number when backed by raw, frightening power. It was a fight that lived up to every ounce of its massive hype, a true clash of eras where youth and speed met size and unyielding strength. While Tyson showed flashes of the brilliance that once terrorized the division, Foreman's ability to take the best shots and fire back with devastating effect carried the day. The old lion roared once more, leaving the boxing world wondering just how far this remarkable comeback can go.
I thought that was pretty good. I thought that was a reasonable prediction about what would have happened, and it aligns with my feelings because I think that Foreman would have beat him. I don't know that it would have happened that fast. I think it may have happened in the 10th round. This happened pretty quick in the 5th, which Tyson was never knocked out early. He was knocked out by Douglas in the 10th, and he was stopped by Holyfield in the 11th, and then he lost to this club fighter way late in his career when he was basically fighting for the money and not really in his mentally right state. But a quote-unquote prime Tyson or near prime Tyson was stopped only in the 10th round by Douglas and then in the 11th round by Holyfield. I don't think Foreman would have been able to take him out that easy, but I do agree that Foreman would have eventually taken him out. I think it would have worn him down. Tyson was obviously devastating. The problem with Tyson was that he was small, and even a guy like Bone Crusher Smith, who was relatively limited skill-wise, but strong and tall, was able to hold off a prime Tyson for 12 rounds. And the same goes for Tony Tucker. Tony Tucker was the IBF champion when Tyson fought him, and I think it was 86, and or maybe it's 87, and finally got the last title to become the undisputed champion. So anyway, that's is Grock's take. So I said, well, it's interesting. Let's see what Bing has to say. And so I had Bing do it as well. Now, I had Bing do it, and then what I did was I put Bing into Grock because the Bing reader was a female, and she was not reading it as I think a boxing. She was reading it kind of more like a concert review of, I don't know, Taylor Swift maybe. So anyway, I had Leo here and Grock read it. And he's the same dude that just read that. So here's Leo's take. Here's Leo's reading of Co-Pilot's take on what would have happened.
In a bout that felt less like a meeting of eras and more like a collision of tectonic plates, George Foreman outlasted and ultimately overwhelmed Mike Tyson in 9 bruising rounds last night at Caesar's Palace. Tyson began with the familiar menace, darting inside, ripping hooks to the ribs, and snapping Foreman's head back with short rights that would have folded most heavyweights. But the older man refused to yield. Foreman's jab, heavy as a mallet and twice as discouraging, found Tyson's chest and shoulders with numbing regularity, slowing the younger champion's advance and forcing him into exchanges he could not dominate. By the 4th, the fight had settled into a grim, grinding rhythm, Tyson attacking in bursts, Foreman answering with the kind of thudding, economy of motion power that drains a fighter's reserves, one shot at a time. The end came, not with a single dramatic openings widened. Foreman walked him down, behind that implacable jab, then uncorked a short right uppercut that sent Tyson reeling into the ropes. A follow-up barrage, nothing wild, just the cold arithmetic of a seasoned puncher, forced the referee's intervention at 2:11 of the 9th. In victory, Foreman didn't roar or celebrate. He simply raised his gloves and nodded, as if acknowledging a truth he had known all along. Tyson, bruised but unbroken, left the ring quickly, the aura dented but not destroyed. For one night, the old line proved that time can bend but not always break. A fighter built from iron and conviction.
That was there was a little mistake there. So I'm going to read what they didn't. It says, Foreman's jab, heavy as a mallet and twice as discouraging, found Tyson's chest and shoulders with numbing regularity, slowing the younger champion's advance and forcing him in exchanges he could not dominate. By the 4th, the fight had settled into a grim, grinding rhythm, Tyson attacking and burst, Foreman answering with the kind of thudding economy of power that drains a fighter's reserves one shot at a time. The end came not with a single dramatic blow, but with a steady accumulation of Foreman's will. Tyson's head movement dulled, his legs stiffened, and the openings widened. Foreman walked him down behind that implacable jab, then uncorked a short right uppercut that sent Tyson reeling into the ropes, and then it picked up from there. And then over, that's the picture, another picture that was generated. And this is, again, a very svelte Foreman, which was not impossible at the time. In the early 90s, he was, actually in 89, he was down, I think in 88, he fought Dwight Muhammad Calloway at 235, which is pretty close to his prime weight of in the 70s. And this picture here that depicts Tyson charging in from his peekaboo stance and Foreman standing upright, I would estimate Foreman to be 245 there. So that would be a very trim Foreman during his comeback. And he never weighed less than 250 after 1990. He only weighed less than 250 before 1990. And that was done purposefully, according to Foreman. Of course, Foreman always changed things to make it seem like he did that on purpose. But he said that he didn't like being small. He wanted to be big. He wanted to be a king-size heavyweight, and he viewed being 240s as too small, which actually may be true because during the Kawi fight, if you watch that fight, Foreman was pushing Kawi, but Kawi was not. I mean, Foreman at 235 was different than Foreman at 250, and definitely different than Foreman at 263. Foreman at 263, when he fought Rodriguez, was like a Sherman tank. And I think that version of Foreman, that's why I picked this time to do it. I think that version of Foreman was the most formidable. The Foreman that ran over Jerry Cooney in 1990, that was the fight. January of 1990, it was when Foreman fought Cooney. And Foreman completely destroyed Cooney. And Cooney was a flawed fighter for sure, but he was probably maybe, well, according to Gil Clancy, who trained him, he was probably the best version of Cooney that ever existed. Now, since he was folded up like a can in 2 rounds, we don't know if that was the best version of Cooney because he retired certainly shortly thereafter again. But Gil Clancy claimed that he had Cooney trained well, and to his credit, Cooney looked the part. He looked slim. He looked tall. But anyway, Foreman had destroyed him earlier in that year. But Foreman at 253 was when he fought Cooney. He fought Rodriguez at 263. He fought Holyfield at 257. In this picture right there, they depict him at 245, which probably was not a good weight for him against Tyson. I think Tyson, if he had fought Tyson, he would have come in around 260 because he would have wanted that extra weight. Now, that being said, 250 was a good weight for him too from a standpoint of beating Michael Moorer. So when he fought Michael Moorer, he was 250. And when he fought Holyfield, he was 257. He was pretty quick at 257. Now, I do remember him saying after the Holyfield fight that he wanted, when he was pining for a rematch. And again, like I said, Foreman was apt to saying things that weren't necessarily true or maybe not necessarily what was going to happen. But Foreman said that for his next fight after the Holyfield fight, he was going to get down to 220s, and then he's going to have a sharper right hand, and he was going to be able to take out Holyfield. And that, of course, never happened. But anyway, that's a little bit of AI in boxing. It's kind of interesting for those of us boxing fans. And this is another thing I did with AI. This fight was supposed to happen. It didn't happen. Well, it wasn't supposed to happen. So this is George Foreman facing off against Lennox Lewis, 1997. And why did I say it was supposed to happen? Well, while Foreman was fighting Lou Savarese, Lennox Lewis was ringside, HBO, and Lennox Lewis was the titular champion, meaning he had the titles. And then Foreman was the, quote, lineal champion because he had the titles or a version of the title and was stripped of it for not fighting the top contender. Foreman was stripped of his IBF title and WABA title that he won from Michael Moorer. He was stripped of the WBA title, I believe, first because he did not fight their top contender. What happened was he fought Axel Schultz with both titles, and then Schultz lost a controversial decision, which many thought that he deserved to win over Foreman. Harold Lederman, interestingly enough, during that fight, if I remember correctly, did not think that Schultz won. Or maybe it was Harold Lederman that thought it won, and then Larry Merchant did not think he won. Either way, one of the two quote-unquote unofficial scores for that fight did think that Foreman beat Schultz. That being said, Foreman did not want to give Schultz a rematch because Schultz was a difficult German fighter who was quote-unquote awkward and strong, and Foreman said, it's not worth the effort. You can have the title. I'll keep the IBF title, which he then was stripped of eventually for, again, not fighting the number one contender. I think they wanted to fight Tony Tucker, or they wanted to fight somebody else, maybe Orlin Norris. I don't remember. But anyway, they stripped him of that. He ended up fighting this I think it was professional wrestler, Crawford Grimsley. Oh, he was a kickboxer. So Crawford Grimsley, he fought in Tokyo for the quote-unquote lineal title because he was never stripped of it. And then he also fought Lou Savarese in 1997. Anyway, during that fight, Lou Savarese fight with Foreman, and it was a really good fight. Foreman weighed 253 for that fight. Savarese was fringe contender, but he was undefeated at the time. He was 36-0. I believe he was 20 years younger than Foreman. Foreman at that point was about 46 or 47. And Savarese lost a close decision again. And some people thought Savarese won. I give the edge to Foreman only because of Foreman was able to dictate the fight. They both got in a lot of blows. You could argue that Foreman's blows at that point weren't as damaging as they had been earlier in his comeback, and which is probably true. But Foreman was boxing more then. Angelo Dundee at that point had been a very good addition to Foreman's corner. Foreman and Dundee hooked up prior to the Holyfield fight, and it was only for a few weeks. And Dundee was brought in essentially to replace Archie Moore. And Dundee was able to convince Foreman to drop the cocoon old mongoose defense where he would wrap his arms around himself. And so by the time he fought Lou Savarese, Foreman was pretty much boxing. And you can hear during the fight where Angelo Dundee's telling Foreman, don't rush it. Take your time. So Angelo Dundee had at that point molded Foreman into basically a boxer with a big punch in reserve that was going to grind you down and then catch you with a bad one and then knock you out. Not the earlier version of Foreman, certainly from the 70s, who was a wild-eyed gunslinger who blew opponents out of the ring with massive circus shots. And he wasn't even the earlier version of Foreman, who was in a hurry, although much more relaxed than the 70s version, to knock you out quick. By the time he finished his career in the late 90s, he was, like I said, a boxing guy. But back to this picture. So they asked Lewis during the commentary, he says, will you fight Foreman after this? And he said, if he wants to fight me, I'll fight him. Anyway, so that fight never happened. Here's a screenshot, here's a AI image from if that fight had happened. As you can see, Lewis is taller than Foreman by about an inch. And Lewis, if that fight had happened, would have most likely won. As much as I hate to say it, I would love to say that Foreman would have caught him with a shot, much the same way that Rockman had caught him with a shot, and the way that Orlin Norris had caught him with a shot and knocked him out. But I think Lewis was smart enough at that point not to screw around with Foreman, would have jab, moved. He would have not tried to mix it up. He would definitely not tried to knock him out. He would have done something similar to Tommy Morrison, albeit with more style, and outboxed Foreman over 12 rounds. As much as it pains me to say that, being a big Foreman fan. Anyway, so that's some fun with AI. What else do we have here? So yesterday I told you too about Olivia. So Olivia on the boat, I took a picture of her. This is the picture I took of her with these little guys. And then she said to Grok to make the one shark say to the other, put me down, and then also for the sharks to dance. And here's that image. Here's that video.
Put me down.
Okay.
Interesting. And that's Olivia's contribution. Here's some more fun with AI. So this is my contribution to the Kinks. And so what I think I told Love Art, I said, make an image of the part of the Kinks song when the character that Ray Davies is narrating says that she picked me up and sat me on her knee and said, pretty boy, you're going to come home with me. This is the picture of the Ray Davies narrator being put on the knee of Lola in the 1960s in some London tavern. And initially what it had was, so I made Love Art make this picture. So initially Love Art did this picture. There's Lola, all of her glory, holding the little guy. And on this table here, you see it says more to come. That initially said cherry cola, which the Love Art had acquired from the lyrics, which says, they serve champagne that tastes just like cherry cola, which initially in the original version said Coca-Cola, but they changed it to cherry cola for having to do with licensing or whatever. Anyway, so it said cherry cola. So I actually told Bing, I uploaded the photo from Love Art to Bing, and I said, hey, swap out those words and put more to come, which is a nod to Johnny Carson from his commercial bumpers, More to Come, where they'd have a picture and it said more to come. Anyway, more to come there. And then I said, and then on my floor here, because I've been doing this with these AI things, is I've been putting in these little Easter eggs, and I said, put a emblem of my EH logo on the floor. And initially it put it kind of where you could see the whole EH logo. And I said, well, make it to where it's like under the chair, so it's obscured, and make it to where it looks like it's been there for the whole time. And I tell you, these AIs are pretty good at doing this. And here's the original photo that I made. And this is where he first walks in. If you're not watching, listening, there's a picture of about a 6-foot lady dressed as a man dressed as a lady. And here's this little guy. He's probably about 5'4", and he's got this little look on his face. And if you know the song Lola, this kid had just left home just a week before. He'd never ever kissed a woman before. And Lola smiled and took him by the hand, said, pretty boy, I'm going to make you a man. So here he is. He's walked into this restaurant or bar, and here's Lola, and they're all on the dance floor. And then again, I told Bing, or Copilot, put my logo on the floor there. So it did. And it looks so great, I think. And then I said, put more to come. Now, interestingly enough, if you add a logo, and this is just for anybody out there trying to mess with this stuff, if let's say you upload a picture of Lola dancing with a Ray Davies narrator, and you say, look, I want it to say more to come, and put EH on the ground. So first thing you say is, okay, swap more to come for cherry cola, and it does it. And then you say, well, all right, now add EH to the ground, and it does it. Well, you'll notice that each time it does it, it's like any copy. It gets a little worse. My advice is to upload it again if you want to do it, and do it all in one fell swoop, rather than have it change its own altered picture. Because this picture isn't identical to the Love Art picture. It's very similar, but it's not identical. And so what I said, so I saw that it uploaded a picture, or created a picture that wasn't exactly what I wanted. So what I said was, I uploaded the picture again, the original Love Art picture. And I said, all right, change the wording to more to come from cherry cola, and also put my EH logo on the floor, obscured by some of the stuff that's on the floor, like the people, and make it look weathered, the same saturation as the floor, like it has been there forever. And there you go. Now, what does all this mean? All this means is you can play around with AI and have fun and do some things. It also means that probably graphic designers have been put out of business. Graphic design, as we know it, is probably is gone, is as extinct as the buggy whip, because this type of generation is available for free. It happens in seconds. I think that any type of creative graphic design where you create something using whatever, that is gone. That's not going to be a part of our existence anymore. And that's not good or bad. It's just the way it is. Just like buggy whips going away was not good or bad. Now, it sucks for people who do graphic design, who are involved in that, because they're very likely not going to have a job. But I'm not saying that to be flippant at all. I'm just saying that as a matter of fact. And we have a finance guy in our practice, and he said he's a finance guy, and he uses financial AI to help with his clients. And he said that he pretty much thinks that a lot of finance is going to be gone. A lot of the financial jobs, white collar financial jobs, are going to be gone on account of AI. So it's going to be an interesting time. Obviously, we never know what's going to happen in the future. AI is AI, just like things evolve, and the internet took over a lot of things. I'm sure put a lot of things out of business. So we'll just have to find out. And the best thing you could do is try to find an AI job. An AI resistant job, or job that cannot be taken over. And like I said before, any job where you actually go and do work cannot be done by AI. AI cannot dig you a fence, at least now. AI is not going to be able to fix a toilet. AI is not going to be able to wire a house. Now, AI may assist with all of those things, and it may make the job easier, but the physical activity of doing it is not going to be replaced. I don't think there'll be a time in the future where Optimus robot is going to be able to fix the plumbing in a toilet. There may be a time in the future where Optimus robots can install a fence, though. That's for sure. So in that case, then that would be an issue. But it's just a few things to think about. Anyway, this is Dr. Tommy Show. If you're interested in learning more about Dr. Tommy Show, go to drtommy.com/podcast. It's available in all audio forms on all major audio outlets, as far as I can tell. And it is also available via video on Rumble and YouTube, virtually live. Here's a shot of the website. There it goes. Rumble, YouTube video, Spotify's audio, SoundCloud is audio, Apple Podcasts audio, Pandora's audio, iHeartRadio's audio, Amazon Music's audio, and there's some more stuff here, some recommended websites. And if you're a concierge doctor or DPC doctor out there, click on this link here. You'll get 1 month free of Atlas MD, which is our EMR partner. And I tell you, Atlas MD pays for itself. And the way I'll tell you that is, if you're a doctor out there and you have your own labs, if you sign up with Atlas MD, the amount of savings you'll get using the Atlas MD lab schedule for Quest Labs pays for Atlas MD every month. Believe me, I know more than pays for itself if you have a full practice or fairly full practice. So definitely worth its weight in digital gold. Anyway, this is Dr. Tommy Show. Like I said, go to drtommyshow.com or drtommy.com/podcast. And then if you're in the area and you want to come in and say hi, and definitely come in and say hi. So until next time, here's a little interaction I had over our cruise with a certain famous person. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.